We were getting off into the weeds there, yeah.
But it does lead us to a point that a relevant point, right? So within the world of crowdfunding, people are constantly being bombarded with asks. So if I think that the tip jar is a really good way to kind of keep that on the down low. Like, they're already committing to going to a festival.
Yeah.
They've already paid X amount to be there. Knowing, and if it's made in the literature, if it's made in the culture, that they're there to, if they appreciate an instructor, they should tip them. Like putting it in the literature, like, it is customary to tip your instructor if you feel so motivated.
Yeah.
And you are helping to create and continue this community that we're co-creating together. So if it's done that way, it's not so much of an ask, right? It becomes part of the culture if it's widely adopted.
Right.
So that's a great way to do it. Now, in terms of like crowdfunding as a whole, I feel like that's an even trickier line to cross.
No, I know. And, I briefly worked at a company that did crowdfunding for charitable efforts a couple years ago. And of course, I do crowdfunding for my videos on YouTube and everything. So it's one of those things that I have seen it work in some really spectacular ways. Like, there's a lot written right now in the business world about how you can think of crowdfunding for a project as essentially being a substitute for a feasibility study. That is, if you have enough of a built-in audience to, based upon a prototype, fund a full production of a given product, then it's probably a good sign that you're going to sell X number of those widgets, right? When you're an artist, things get to be a little bit more complicated, not the least of which because in theory, you're creating a body of work rather than funding just a one-off kind of effort. And it's very the platform that I use for crowdfunding my videos is one called Patreon. And, the idea of crowdfunding for an artist's work is something that's comparatively new in the crowdfunding world. And it fundamentally, it changes that relationship a little bit in that rather than finding out if there is, enough of a saturation of people out there who want this particular product that you're creating, it instead becomes a volume of people that are just all like, oh, I appreciate your efforts and I want to, help you keep on doing those efforts. And the trade-off there is that there might not be the physical thing that you can point to, like the rewards or the finished product that you've contributed to creating. Sometimes it's just a matter of, there's a new video up every week and somebody can say, hey, I helped contribute to that, or you get your name in the credits or something like that.
Yeah, but that's a product. That's a thing.
It is, but again, it's one of those things that I think we're wired to like the idea of, okay, here's this big project that we're going to put together and finish and everything, and now we're going to walk away from it, I think something that is sustainable in the long term is a different kind of model, and it's one that I'm still curious to see how it's going to evolve, because in theory, it's not that much different from the patronage system that existed hundreds of years ago for famous artists.
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah, no,
exactly
absolutely. The question is when we're living in an era of immediate kind of social and physical gratification and everything, does that then create a problem if your product is a body of work instead of, a pebble watch that you can wear around on your wrist, even if it's a year late,
No, I think that there's definitely a market for it, especially in the community that we're a part of. And it's just finding the right catch, the right feeling around it, right? Because there's a huge problem in getting people to even crowdfunding support their own personal communities. Like we have a really big issue getting people to donate $1 per jam. You know, like,
Yeah.
hey dudes, like this block rocker costs $250. Like, help us support it. So it's like a way to switch that thinking to where they understand what they're supporting and what that equates and what that means, right?
No, totally. And I also grok that there's, you know, a side to this too, where I'm sure that there are a lot of people out there that are fearing, okay, if we're monetizing this and we're monetizing that, where does that end? Is just every part of this community eventually going to get monetized? Am I going to have to pay to learn something from anybody? Am I going to have to, you know, pay for any prop? Am I going to have to pay to exchange ideas with people at spin jams and things like that? And yeah, they're fundamentally in our culture is this spirit of, you know, free giving, which I think is wonderful. And I think it's something that makes the flow arts community very special. And as people attempt to make a living of it and attempt to monetize it, that is inherently a danger that's built into it. And I don't think we've yet figured out what the balance is there. And not the least of which being because I don't think we've established a standard yet of, okay, so when does teaching my friend a couple tricks graduate to the point where I'm creating a lesson plan and this is something that I should be paid as a teacher for? When does, you know, having a spin jam graduate into creating a top level event that is worth charging people tickets for? When does the content that I'm creating as, you know, a video producer reach the point at which it's professional enough and it's useful enough that it either ought to be monetized or hidden behind a paywall in some way, shape, or form, you know?
Right. Well, and I love that spirit of the free giving, of the give culture, the gift culture. And but I feel like we can still maintain that part of the culture, but understand that even in a free giving, a gift giving culture, there's a value exchange.
Yes, absolutely.
And that the value exchange needs, whether, I mean, so in projects that I do, because I'm a designer, right?
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of the things that I create don't have that, you know, it's not a final thing. It's like, if you get paying for my brain right now and like that stuff. I like to do trades. So, but there has to be some money involved because at the end of the day, it is my profession. I still paid for a degree.
No, totally.
Right? And so when you're this independently community taught artist, what, you know, how much, like, you owe the community to give back, right? Because they brought you up, but you still have to be able to move forward with your own life. And
absolutely.
And there is a way that crowdfunding, the democratization of our art, can work and manifest. And I think the tip jar is a great start because it's, I mean, Penn Jillette says you have to pass the hat, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and, you know, just kind of seizing upon one of those themes there, I think people have this tacit assumption that once you're well known as an artist, that inherently income must come with that. And I don't think many of them actually stop to think like, okay, so this one person has like 100,000 YouTube hits and everything, which is way more than I've got. But, you know, what is the mechanism by which those 100,000 YouTube hits actually turn into a livable income? Is it, you know, teaching workshops because, you know, you have to get bodies in the door for that? Is it monetizing their videos on YouTube? Because quite frankly, if you're doing well, you're getting paid about $1 for every 1,000 views you're getting. You know, last year I was fortunate enough to interview Nick Woolsey when I was traveling through Vancouver. And in the course of that interview, he like put something into words that I'm flabbergasted at how kind of concise and accurate it was, which is just that, you know, as lovely as they are, you can't eat YouTube hits, you know? When it comes right down to it, you know, you can have all of the hits, but that doesn't, for you personally, it doesn't do much more for you than say, hey, there's X number of people that are enjoying this content that I've got out there and everything. You still have to pay the bills. You still have to eat and everything. And, you know, granted, there are quite a lot of people out there that are able to, you know, kind of balance having some kind of gainful employment with creating content. But I mean, for me personally, like the content is the job at this point, you know?
And you're doing it full time, right?
Yeah, I full time is a very, very, very bizarre concept when you're self-employed. Like,
Yeah.
because I mean, and it took me a long time to realize this after I quit my day job, which is just when you have a day job, it's like you show up to work at 9, you have your lunch break, and you go home at 5. And there may be like little things that you've got to like kind of, wrap up from the day and everything. But fundamentally, there's a stop point. There is a point at which you go home and you become a person again. When you're doing the flow arts or really anything else freelance, and that is your job, that is you're self-employed and everything, that disappears. There is no easy distinction anymore between work time and personal time. So basically, from the moment I wake up in the morning to the moment I go to sleep, all of it's work in some way, shape, or form, So calling it a full-time job at this point
It's a
is,
lifestyle.
yeah, exactly. It's describing it in terms that almost don't really even apply anymore, if that makes any kind of sense,
Oh yeah, yes,
Mm-hmm.
yes, that makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
And back to the conversation at hand, I think making that. Oh, I got another call. Maybe he'll come back and we'll have voice again. Um,